think, I think everybody's kind of feeling that COVID isn't over. So we're not really at the point where we're done with COVID and let's move on. But there is a part of COVID that there's a recovery aspect to it. At some point, we have to deal with the damage that COVID has done, and we also have to seize the opportunities that COVID maybe expose more broadly. So what do you think is important in the kind of the COVID recovery, and why do you think why do you feel those things are so important?
Thanks. Yes. So we, in the planetary health community, we look at COVID as a planetary health emergency because we know that it's a virus that started at the intersection of animals and people. And we know that as we progress forward with changing climate, et cetera, we're going to see more habitat change. And it's when habitats change and we get biodiversity loss that we end up with other novel intersections of that. And that's when viruses are more likely to happen. So there's no link between this pandemic and climate change, but certainly climate change will be a driver of other similar pandemics. And climate change also is known, the World Health Organization calls it the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. I know that's hard to believe given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, but when we think of, I live in Yellowknife, so we're already 2.5 degrees Celsius warmer than we were when an 80-year-old elder was born. I serve a patient population that goes up to Inuvik, and so they're already 3 degrees Celsius warmer. So, and we're committed in Canada to 2 degrees Celsius more warming because of greenhouse gases already in the atmosphere by the 2040s to 2050s, according to the Canada's Changing Climate Report. So we look at this as a planetary health emergency. And I think that the opportunity here is for us to say, this is not okay. We've had trouble in the past making the point that for a healthy economy, we need to have healthy people. And we've just had it proven to us. And so I kind of look at this moment in time as my kids sometimes will get these, complicated Lego kits, and they'll spend 2 days, putting it all together after Christmas or whatever. And then a toddler will come in, someone's kid will come over for dinner and we'll just like explode it. We'll just like run into it. There'll be like Lego all over the place. So pre-COVID, we had a, relatively functioning Lego structure. We're trying to ask people like, please take it apart. It's not going to do us good in the long run. It's not sort of benefiting everybody. And it's hard to ask people to switch up the status quo. And now we're all scattered all over. And so I think, it's a moment of tremendous vulnerability, but also opportunity if we are able to support one another through this period and then put it together in a way that keeps us safe and healthy in the long run. And so that's how I'm putting a real push on right now to try to influence this outcome. And it's because I suspect we won't see another moment of this type of, disruption accompanied by government spending again in the time window remaining for us to take productive action on the climate emergency.
Sure, thank you. And Randy, I'm sure you probably have something to say about how the government spending and the initiatives and that sort of thing, the opportunities that can be seized during this time.
Well, I'm just trying to think up a fancy metaphor like Lego, but nothing is coming to my mind. So I'm going to have to just, I don't mean to say fancy. I mean, that was a really good metaphor, but it's definitely an interesting time. I mean, one of the things that COVID has given us is that it's told us that if we are in a real emergency, if we believe that we're in a real emergency, that our governments and the people of Canada and people around the world are able to take action. They'll actually say, okay, this is important. This is more important than other things like balancing the budget or what have you. We're going to take action because this is a real emergency. And we haven't seen this kind of reaction really since World War II, because we've been in this era, probably about 40 years now, I guess you could call it, where we're obsessed with cutting public services, cutting public spending, cutting taxes, free trade, privatization, that whole agenda that has made a lot of corporations and certain people very rich while leaving others behind. So we know that we can take action if we believe it's a crisis. But here's the thing, before any of this started, we had lots of crises going on. I mean, you talked about the crisis of colonialism. or we could talk about the crisis of anti-Black racism, or the crisis in housing, or any number of things, poverty. But the big crisis, of course, that Dr. Howard's talking about is the climate crisis. And what is so fascinating to me is that it's now become clear with COVID that the reason we haven't done anything, and when I say we, I mean governments, people, everyone, the reason we haven't done anything to match our COVID response about climate change is apparently we don't think it's a crisis. And that is really the tough problem to solve. Now, with COVID, I think it's an opportunity because COVID has revealed a lot of the fault lines of society. In Toronto, where I live, the most, and I think it's around the world and across the country, you're more likely to get COVID if you're racialized. You're more likely to get COVID if you were forced to go back to work because you weren't able in your job to work from home. So it's revealed a really divided society. And inequality is something that we have to deal with while we're dealing with climate change. Now, what's good about the current situation is that there are so many great ideas lying around about how we can respond to the inequality crisis, respond to the housing crisis, respond to the climate change crisis all at the same time. So that's good. And I just think we can't say, okay, we had our crisis and now it's over and that's all the money we can spend. So we'll just have to see if we can put the Lego machine back together kind of the way it was. I think that would be a great tragedy. And given the carbon budget that's left to us and the amount of time we have to really make fast changes, it would be a big mistake if we didn't seize the opportunities that are in front of us right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's been populations, as you both mentioned, that have been struggling for a very long time. And so some people want to say, you know, well, we didn't know all these things were happening, but I do think to your points, we've known about these crises for a long time. Maybe they haven't always been accepted within the general public, but these aren't necessarily new. They've just been exposed, as you said, Randy, as like fault lines. They've been exposed much more than they were before. And going back to that affordability, when you know, Adam and I or some of the groups that we work with talk to, whether it be municipal, provincial, or federal politicians, there always seems to be this sense, but we can't afford really to take care of climate. We can't really afford to deal with COVID. We can't take care of people forever. We just can't afford that. And I think probably both of you have different perspectives on the affordability side of it. So start with you, Randy. Is, you know, we can go with where that started from, but more importantly, is there any truth to it that we can't afford to take care of climate? We can't afford to tackle inequity or poverty or these COVID repercussions?